In this review, I'm gonna skip the usual antics so I can discuss a serious topic with you all that deserves a very important conversation to be had within the indie animation space. Fandoms. But first, there are two things I want to make myself clear on before we begin. First of all, this review was originally intended to be for a different cartoon I have previously watched before Screen Age Meme Land. Now, I was planning to review this a while back after my Plinko and Mark review since it was one of the first indie cartoons that showed up on my feed before I began production on Indiehemius Season 2. Therefore, it was originally part of my roster, and overall, I kind of forgot about it, but upon revisiting Screen Age Meme Land, I found it not worthy enough to have an episode made on. Not just because it wasn't that popular enough or had enough views to be covered on, but because I found it to be really terrible. It's too god-awful to waste a week and a half churning out a review on. However, I will still briefly explain my thoughts about it anyway to save you time. Aside from the animation being grotesque yet really good, it's genuinely unfunny, the humor is outdated, the voice acting is cringe, the characters are blatant ripoffs that aren't very clever, and the overall nature of the show feels like it was intended to pander to a different kind of audience on a sophisticated political level, rather than being suitable for the traditional audiences most indie animation shows rack up. It doesn't really fit my channel at all, despite me reviewing the new norm in Season 1. If I really wanted to make a video on it, I'd rather best make one for my alt channel Rapsodius, since I tend to talk things more political there and make videos there that are not really necessary for my main channel. But alas, no matter how many current topics Screen Age Meme Land squeezes in its shitty 3-episode trilogy, it isn't good nor noticeable enough to be on the Indiehemius roster anymore. Also, they resorted to using AI in their content in their latest uploads now, so that sucks. Sellouts. Second, I have talked about fandoms before in my last review, stating how fandoms are usually created and how much of an influence it has on the franchise it grew from, but I feel like I haven't talked enough about how fandoms can have that tremendously negative impact, which can screw over said franchise and its creator. With that being said, it's been a wild week. With the finale of The Amazing Digital Circus leaked, even though I saw it last night prior to recording this review, and the pilots for Gameoverse and Planetronika releasing, the cracks of the indie animation industry begin to grow bigger. But it's not because of the indie content and the creators itself, albeit Gooseworks having known to not care about her finale being leaked at all, but it's all because of us, the fandom and the cartoon community as a whole. The truth is, they are so damn toxic. And I know like 1,000 other people have said this online, like it's the most obvious thing to ever come out since I found a fork in the kitchen, but given the current events happening within the cartoon community as a whole and how many dumb fans choose to act on it, instead of thinking beforehand logically and morally, the never-ending cycle and rise of toxicity in fandoms is a thing that should be studied and analyzed into being its own case away from the indie animation projects and creators. It may sound convoluted to separate the fan base from the franchise, but it deserves to be done because not only are the toxicity and hatred of indie animation fandoms, especially within Glitch Productions and the Helliverse, yet too overwhelmingly big for some creators to handle aside from the fame, but it has also gotten so big to be a problem on its own terms on the internet as we speak. It eventually gets to an unhealthy rate where it not only affects the creators the toxic fans go after, but also themselves on a more personal scale, because only a man could bear so much hate and loathing upon himself and another man that it will eventually lead to his downfall. These aren't biblical teachings like how they sound. There's no demon-possessed spirit that's making them like this. I'm not the faithful sheriffing or LARPing as a Christian. That's just naturally how fans are in life. They're nearly satanic. They need to be psychologically evaluated, and the fandom can herd so much of these bastards that it eventually becomes more unsafe to hang around and chat with those fond of the things you love and have fun. It ruins the whole vibe! What makes it more difficult to follow about about these fandoms is how they tend to go after the wrong people for the wrong reasons. When the TADC finale got leaked, people chose to go after the creator Gooseworks instead of the leakers who illegally data mined it out of the internet coal mines. Yes, I think Gooseworks should have taken the situation more seriously and copyright strike the leak out of existence before everyone could download and archive it, as she famously said that she did not care about it for one bit. But fandoms will always find ways to pinpoint the blame on anyone other than the perpetrators, especially when it comes to blaming the victim, whom at this point didn't deserve to have her content leaked at all. And yet these toxic fans go out of their way and criticize and spoil the whole damn thing without any decency for respecting the time it was originally supposed to come out. And with the other things going on in the TADC fandom, such as the Michael Kovac and Ashley Nichols N-word incident, where they referred to the negachin down to nega in a live stream years ago, and how one of the biggest figureheads for multiple fandoms, Jake Neutron, being ousted for harassing a sexual assault victim and drawing CP of them. Ooh, CP! The cracks start to form in the community that show created, proving itself to be insecure and likely to implode on itself whenever some little tidbit happens or some dumb fuck decides he's gonna pull punches next day. Even stirring up potential transphobia and misogyny in the circle, the same taboos these fandoms were destined to push away from themselves. They reversed the shit out of it to the point that now they are the chuds. It then leads to the indie animation fandoms pushing other creators and animators away from aspiring to become showrunners and have their own web series like they dreamed of having, like Glitch Productions or even Spindlehorse for that matter. Many animators tend to drive away from making their passion projects come to life because of the fear and insecurity of generating a fandom that's as toxic as the other fandoms for more popular shows out there. Many animators tend to drive away from making their passion projects come to life because of the fear and insecurity of generating a fandom that's as toxic as the other fandoms for more popular shows out there. They don't want to deal with this fandom shit as soon as they make a thing and that thing gets a million views online. And the numerous examples of fandom toxicity such as within the indie animation community is what leads to the decline in people feeling more ambitious to create their own indie shows these days. And that lack of ambition or insecurity of creating them is what leads to less indie animated pilots and series being created by people other than those at Glitch or Spindlehorse because of the fandom. And less indie content on the site means I have less content to review for Indiehemius, and less Indiehemius means less content for the Bohemius channel. And I think that's the tragedy of it all. Indie animation brings out the worst in fans and viewers when it comes to fandoms. I remember what Animate had to say on his podcast stream a few days ago, and there was one thing that stuck out to me that was worth remembering from. Toxic fandoms deserve to be held accountable, no matter how big or negative of an impact they have on the project they fawn over. They deserve to take as much accountability as the creators and their shows do. Carelessness, excuses, people who beat their weenies to the kiddies, and even more toxicity will just make them even worse. And if fans don't tend to watch their backs more often, then these fandoms will never become any more of a safer place, and nothing will get better from that point forward, rendering the content we watch to be less enjoyable for us because of those fandoms, and making other creators distance themselves from being involved in the indie animation scene. What the hell happened to basic human decency, the culture of basic kindness in James Gunn's Superman, Charlie Chaplin's famous speech at the end of The Great Dictator, the legacy of Mr. Rogers, Miss Rachel being one of the only good YouTube Kids creators out there with a New York City government position, Hank Williams' quote about men with broken hearts that Elvis Presley indirectly stole from him but made it sound cooler, Christ's victory over death, in which the final enemy the Lord shall defeat is death itself, for all you orthodox folks out there. Now I know I am no better than these people in the fandoms who are as toxic as the dip from Who Framed Roger Rabbit is to cartoons, or how corrosive fandoms are as acetone is to Legos, because, well, I tend to criticize indie animation more often. But who knows? God willing, we'll all meet again in Indiehemius Season 3, the search for more subs. But if you are one of those toxic toxic people part of those toxic fandoms, and here are some helpful online or physical resources that might help you. Get it? Because you fandom freaks need to get a job, work out, and take a shower! Okay, now let's tear open the shit that's been trending for a few weeks now. This is Planetronika. Planetronika is an animated pilot created by Raphael Andaya 3 weeks prior to the time I'm writing this. Just 3 weeks! And over those 3 weeks leading to the present day where I'm writing the script for this, Planetronika managed to reach 2 million views, over 100,000 subs for the creator, and lots of fan art, occasionally having its fame being paired with Gamerverse, which came out 5 days later. God, it's even more than I'll ever achieve with those lame-ass food reviews I phased out shortly after. Trying Wingstop for the third time. Fries. Six out of 10. Dr. Pepper. 10 out of 10. Boneless spicy atomic flavor wings. Oh, can't forget about the ranch. Come on, bastards. You better make this damn spicy. Okay, for like the atomic flavor, these aren't really that spicy. What the hell, Wingstop? These taste mild as shit. Another win for atomic wings. Okay, this is getting lame. I gotta up the ante. Or my drug reviews that followed up soon after. Trying crack for the first time. Crack pipe, looking as beautiful as ever. Nine out of 10. Crack, looking as whack as ever. 7 out of 10. Lighter. Ooh, look at this beauty. 10 out of 10. Alright, now let's try our crack. Crack, crack, crack. Open the little thing. Put the crack in there. Ooh, look at this yummy crack. Crack is so delicious. Oh, beautiful. Okay, that's enough crack. Look at the crack. Time to do this. Hey Bohemius, what are you doing? Crack. What the fuck? But why did it get so popular, and how did it become popular in the first place? Well, for one thing, it's no doubt that Raphael is a talented animator. Like an extremely talented animator. Seriously, he animated this all on his own by himself. I guess it does make sense why he's an exceptional animator enough to animate on his own, considering he has single-handedly animated in the exact same style as Totally Spies, Studio Ghibli, and even animated for Planet Dolan at one point, I think. He's also an exceptional artist too, so that also might explain it. Also, I can't help but also notice that a lot of people online tend to dig into the Fruitiger era aesthetic to an extent. The same with Fruitiger Metro. I mean, I get that I have personally grew up with an influence of Fruitiger Aero, with a Windows XP laptop and a Windows Vista and a 7 computer. I even had vague childhood memories of those LED bubble tubes filled with water for the sensory room in the daycare I attended when I was a kid. That, and constantly being threatened to be sent to the insane asylum when I was a kid. Actually, what am I doing? I'm a grown man now. I can buy those bubble tubes and experience them myself once again. I wonder how much it costs. $1,600? Christ. I have to sell my extra RAM sticks for one of those, don't I? Were they made in Switzerland or something? I don't usually outweigh aesthetics over everything else in the source material when I review certain media, and nowadays I'm more of a 90s global village coffeehouse aesthetic kind of guy. But given how many people today are still in love with that Y2K aesthetic, I probably shouldn't explain further why Planetronika would get this outrageously popular like Gamerverse has. But is Planetronika really that good? Does it deserve all the fame and attention it gets? And better yet, does reviewing this deviate from my plan to review Screen Age Meme Land being scrapped in placement of this? We're about to find out. The story of this pilot shouldn't be hard to follow since there is absolutely no lure to it. Or at least if there almost isn't any at all. One thing's for sure is that it does take place on a funny Earth-looking planet called Terrestre. Okay, who the hell were the Romanians in charge of naming this planet? I guess I shouldn't complain about the Europop presence a lot, as they also slid in a fun Easter egg with Ozone and the Numa Numa song. But the premise mostly is that this chick named Butterfly and her green best friend named Freestyle, surprised they can look the part along with having very Y2K-ish names, try to play basketball one day until the ball loses control and causes chaos in the city, and that's pretty much it. Since the plot really isn't that deep, it feels more like a vibe cartoon to watch for fun rather than explore character depth or the world's complexity. But one thing it makes up for that really well is the humor. I find this pilot's humor to be subtle yet still funny on acceptable levels. It isn't as chaotic on the levels of some of the other shows I've previously reviewed, but it isn't too bland with it neither. I mean, don't get me wrong, this show's humor is chaotic, just not on more intense levels of some of the shows I've reviewed earlier, but it can still manage to pull out a few chuckles from me, even having a few references that atone to the Y2K era, such as the Moldovan band Ozone dancing on a plane like I've mentioned before, or even the phone sounding like one of those bootleg toy phones that play Smile DK's Butterfly. Actually, I collected like 3 or 4 of these toy phones myself, so I too am familiar with the sound they make. Like this one, for instance. The comedic timing is also clever because the ball goes crazy, bouncing from place to place at the right pacing and time, where it feels fast and spontaneously unpredictable like a pinball. You'll never know where it's gonna hit at the right time in the right place. So that's something reassuring to hear. The one major complaint that I often hear about this pilot having from the online cartoon community is the ubiquitous sex appeal they apparently shove in your face. Now, I know how convoluted the online online cartoon community is, especially on Twitter, but when they claim that this is the biggest problem the pilot comes across, they somewhat have a point. I'm not saying that I'm entirely siding with them when they say this pilot sucks, but they aren't wrong when they think how annoyingly insistent the sexual innuendos are in this pilot, in one of the many super ultra mega rare cases regarding the cartoon community, despite not touching Twitter in over a year. I will agree with them that perhaps there is a bit too much sex appeal laced within the comedy of the pilot itself. The suggestive references, poses, shots, and innuendos can usually get up all in your face, half the time that it's a bit annoying, so much that it almost feels intentional to add twice the dosage of it in there for more clicks, which I can guess where they're coming from when they say this pilot is just gooner bait, comparing it to Gamerverse, for which the community shares the exact same criticism for having too much sex appeal because it's a beach episode and the cat girl wears a bikini and the evil white lady also wears a bikini, and yeah, you get the gist. I say that it might be a little too suggestive for a pilot aiming at a designated audience of 13 to 16-year-olds. I mean, the butt scenes and the scene where Freestyle gets naked kinda shows that. But you know, since this was meant to give off the vibe of an early to mid-2000s French-Canadian action cartoon, I have a feeling that the sexual innuendos and suggestive appeals were bound to happen from the beginning. It reminds me of an obscure French cartoon I watched as a kid on Kabillion, Bunny Maloney, which shares the same style and aura of Planetronika and the Y2K bubble, despite its 3D animation. It even bears a huge amount of sexual innuendos and suggestive appeal that this show packed under its belt I was exposed to at a younger age, because Kabillion didn't care about censorship and let it slide at the time, which is hilariously fucking ironic considering the pilot and early pitch of Bunny Maloney was originally intended to be way more mature for older audiences beforehand.
Cartoon.
And apparently it got filed down to be a kids show on Kabillion of all streaming services. And comparing Planetronika to Bunny Maloney in terms of vibe and the consistent sex appeal that should have been meant for more mature audiences, it sort of takes me home, really. I'm not saying that I'm a gooner. I mean, yes, it's true that I'm a gooner in real life nonetheless, but I do all of my gooning privately. I goon, but I goon responsibly. Legal material, you know, but I just get this weird feeling that Planetronika's one massive flaw, that most of the Twitter cartoon community hates it for justifiable reasons, hits me like a truck. I'm not defending it or anything, I'm just saying it's reminiscent of Bunny Maloney, a show which the cartoon community also fondly remembers as a kid and will praise it for being mostly lost media. Maybe it's a plot that doesn't take itself too seriously in terms of lore and world building, and maybe the constant sex appeal and suggestive material this show displays was inevitable at this point, but it did manage to get a giggle or two out of me for being funny. For Planetronika is very important to discuss regarding this pilot, because it's possibly the biggest factor of why this pilot is so unique and popular in the first place. As I mentioned before, Raphael Andaya is a very talented and brilliant artist and animator, having known to replicate the styles of classic 2000s cartoons like Totally Spies, as well as artwork of Disney content such as Kim Possible, and the animation for Planetronika is no exception. Because one of Planetronika's main ambitions is to make a Y2K inspired cartoon, their animation meets beyond my standards of becoming one, because this is one of the best examples of animation I have seen so far, at least aesthetic coded or vibe coded or whatever I'd refer to it as, when a certain animator animates an entire cartoon in a style that's already been done in the past for TV animation or are super nostalgic to them. The Y2K inspired animation is fabulous. and it captures the essence of the aesthetic certain time period it thrived in. I know that this is not supposed to be extravagant given the limited frames and anime-styled animation that usually dominated television animation in the 2000s, but that's what makes it all the merrier. It's animated exactly in the same way as Totally Spies was, the French cartoon with an anime-inspired approach that Raphael originally mimicked the style of. It carries on those traits to Planetronika to make it an authentic Y2K cartoon, and the results can be beautiful. You can tell this cartoon looks like a full production of an animated TV series that just got its lost episodes leaked on YouTube, like it's nothing but shovelware, even though this was probably easier to animate than some of the bigger scale indie animation projects out there, even if it was one person. Well, that person has all the effort and time to make your eyes deceive you and trick you into thinking this was an actual series that became lost media at one point. He still believed in the future that's long been forgotten and lost hope of ever existing sometime around 20 to 50 years later with the futuristic Frutiger era vibe, and that's where it got him at to this day. With the color palette, character proportions, and backgrounds attributing to that charm, there's another important feature of the animation that makes the animation style more legitimate. It has a subtle VHS filter. Now, I know I've been through the same song and dance talking about the video filtering of a pilot in my previous review regarding Plinko and Mark, but the low quality precisely captures the aesthetic in the exact right time period. The time period Planetronika is based off of. The creator even rendered the video to be at its highest available resolution of 480p according to YouTube, something Raphael did that Plinko and Mark didn't to make the low and subtle VHS quality more authentic by lowering the resolution, which makes it look like they try less hard to implicate a cheap VHS filter to call it retro, yet still does its best to capture the aesthetic in the most accurate and realistic time period possible, and it definitely synchronizes along with the Y2K animation well, no doubt. It's brilliant. You know, there's a certain pattern of the indie animated shows and pilots that get released on YouTube and other sites like Newgrounds in terms of quality and quantity, which in that case being that an indie project can have good animation despite not having good writing, and an indie project can have good writing despite not having really great animation. Planetronika is no stranger to that logic, and given how many nickels I'm supposed to get for reviewing an indie show with top-tier animation, despite a lackluster story, then that can of Chef Boyardee pasta is coming home to me if it was the 80s. There's no doubt that the animation for Planetronika is the best and most important part of this pilot. The characters are a tad debatable, albeit there are not many important characters to cover aside from the two main ones, of course. There's Butterfly, the female protagonist who's supposed to be this hip and sassy young woman who'd take a chance to boast at her greatest strengths and abilities she has despite being just a normal girl with a ray gun. Like, wow. Butterfly? You couldn't think of a better name to give her? Couldn't you rely on the Romanians who helped write this stir up a better name for her or something? But alas, her personality is as generic as her name. She's dumb, cocky, overly passionate, annoying, snoggy, and is probably built to be like a background character from Totally Spies. Her voice also sounds generic. No offense to the voice actors in this, by the way. The same goes for Freestyle, her green alien friend. You're pulling my chain here. Freestyle? You named him that? Really? I mean, no offense, but it sounds like you're lopping as a Jet Set Radio fan right now. But his personality is also alike from Butterfly, since he's also rude, cocky, arrogant, prideful, snarky, egotistical, and sounds like a hot shot in over half the scenes. His voice also sounds a bit unusual and quirky.
Yeah, sure. Just remember, we've got time for only one game, alright? One game!
Like if he sounded like that one guy from Super Origami Kingdom who does rants in a cheap copy-paste PNG avatar with. Which guy? I don't know. Perhaps the guy that sounds like a British army captain turned wanted fugitive, who would have pistol whipped you down the stairs and confronted you with that gun about why the bloody hell does a guy named Makarov know you.
Batman legit pulls out a bad credit card! A bad credit card? Are you shitting me?
So why in bloody hell does Makarov know you?
You know who I'm talking about. In general, it's nothing what you'd not expect from them if you're looking for a reason to dislike this pilot. The personalities are bland and boring. They don't infuriate me to some extent to how fruitless they are, but I'm slightly frustrated how these overly cliche personalities are possessed within the same bodies of great character design, and that's where we transition to the lighter side of the things that salvage the quality of their characters. Their designs. For characters with unimpressive personalities, this pilot bears outstanding character designs for them. I mean, given the vibe and timeline this pilot based itself off of, the groovy character designs were just imminent from the start. Like with Butterfly, for instance. She has a modest design for a young woman that's simple, yet still charming to appease the older, more nostalgic demographic. Her body portions reflect upon the Y2K animation style I've praised in this video earlier, and she just goes along great with red hair. And I can't forget about Freestyle's design, which is my favorite design in the entire show. I really dig his look as a tall, slim alien. His design is practically the result you get when Clayman from Neverhood and Beat from Jet Set Radio had a baby together, which makes it all the more glorious to look at. Additionally, he looks like a duck crossed together with the rare epic jelly skin I own on Fortnite. I redeemed a V-Bucks card for, and I think that's where Raphael peaked in character design. It's perfect for this universe. The character design as a whole balances the simplicity and futuristic vibe of the show's structure. Even the background characters, like the spherical alien cat-like balls, and background characters that make a brief appearance fit the show's aura, like the stink of a Discord mod or one of those overly autistic ranters and logo kids. I don't even care if you might disagree with me on it and call it Gooner bait. This is pretty good Y2K-esque character design right over there. Gee, Biwa Hayahidi really let herself go in the early 2000s. As much as I can't stand the overly cliche and generic personalities and voices of the main characters, like how all you other people would criticize this show for, I can't help but feel a fair share of respect towards the effort in the character design, and character design alone that fits the show's aesthetic. It's on par with the animation that deserves much praise for, and I think we should leave it at that before we mindlessly call it Gooner slop in most of the wrong places. I mean, sure, I have argued about the sex appeal in this pilot that makes it obviously not for kids, but there are way hotter fictional women and art pieces online that you can goon to without any limits out there. Way hotter than Butterfly or even Freestyle, so take it with a grain of salt, as long as you goon to people that are of legal age and older instead of that lolly shit and cartoon children nonsense like you're a Loud House fan. I know I shouldn't promote this on my channel, but as someone who's 21 talking towards people who are around the same age as me, please goon responsibly, and also take a shower, and also get a job. We don't want any new Nova Online or EDP 445 to sprawl up on the internet that's gonna make us fat, ugly, and autistic people look even worse in real life. I mean, I've been spending 2 years trying to find a job while in college after the summer youth employment program, only to decide that the SYEP is something I am gonna keep doing and applying for until I'm 24. So I think I may be set for 3 more summers. To keep it simple, Planetronika is a vibe cartoon. It's as much of a vibe cartoon as Ralph Bakshi's movie Hey Good Lookin', which mostly relies on the feel-good depiction of New York in the 50s and life as a greaser, rather than bearing a functional plot, as well as a kick-ass soundtrack. Planetronika is just like that movie. As a pilot, it doesn't deserve to be taken that seriously in terms of lore and world building. And with that in mind, I don't think it deserves a very serious fandom and cult following going for it. But what I can understand and why this pilot got so popular and well praised by people from around the corners of the internet other than Twitter and the online cartoon community is that it succeeds the most in being a vibe cartoon. Factors such as animation, character design, the comedy, and hell, maybe even the suggestive material all play a part in what makes this indie pilot gain all the love it gets, compared to the hate it also gets. Its amazing animation takes most of us Gen Z and millennial folks to a time long forgotten that we wish we could have lived. The comedy has good timing and decent pacing, and even the innuendos and suggestive material pay homage to a show I fondly remember watching with similar execution, although it may shove it in your face a little too much. And I can't forget the character design. God, I love the character design in this, which strangely enough overestimates the personality and voice acting. I probably wouldn't go deep with this pilot on an emotional or psychological level because of the lack of lore and minimal storytelling, but for what it's all worth, regardless of any fandom or community, I don't see why not in recommending this pilot to you. All that truly matters to me is that Planetronika is fun to watch. My name is Bohemius, and I will see you all in the next episode of Indiehemius. Alright, clankers! Mr. Ellison, can you not call us clankers? That is a racist slur and offensive to us robots, and I prefer you do not say that again, or else I will get my good friend Grok to cancel you on Twitter. Whatever. Listen up, you artificially intelligent fools! We've got a situation regarding this indie animation trend that's going on. Now, I know these past few weeks and months have proved to be stressful considering the irony that the indie animation industry, whom we believe is just a measly genre of animation for little kiddies and dumbass woke libtards, is on the rise in publicity. These indie creators think they can have the power to dominate over us in the industry we control, and they can't! Not with the fact that we are about to acquire Warner Brothers in one of the biggest corporate buyouts of a lifetime, and with the decision to get rid of that pesky Stephen Colbert to make the president happy so he can greenlight the buyout. The path has never been clearer than ever to grow to inevitable amounts of power, now with Warner Brothers in our grasp. But you know, I have this strange, awful feeling that it's not going to make us the most money afterwards. And I have an even more terrible feeling that this trend of indie animators might overestimate us in their power, especially within the film industry such as The Backrooms movie and Obsession. And with the amazing Digital Circus ending, who knows what will be the next wave of indie animated projects and shows that will dismantle our image. But boss, we are already as big as we are. Yes, I know that, you metal dingus! But it's already more than enough with YouTube of all sites making an actual trend report on indie animation. It's not cool! We can't let indie animation or anyone who supports it get in the way of bankrupting us right before the merger is completed. So, what do you suggest we do, boss? Simple. I want you to do what we've done to Stephen Colbert before. Kill them! Kill them all! Bring the dip onto those indie toons! Martyr those reviewers and online cartoon communities and ungrateful fandoms who dare stand in our way! Let's try smaller targets first. Like him, for example. He's weak and makes an easy shot for you to take. Once we mow people like him down, we can take down the bigger indie animated projects and their creators. And then we can go after even bigger ones like Glitch and Spindlehorse. And soon after, all of their pencil slop will be reduced to atoms by our powerful Israel-backed AI! But sir, he's not an animator or an artist. He's just a measly dumb reviewer and critic. I freeloaded in his mom's house once. His room smells god-awful. He's a real chud. I know that, you dimwit! That's why he makes an easy first target. You see my point? So, what do you say, my loyal, trusty AI unit? Are you ready to hunt this fat chud down?
I'm in.